The avoidant person experiences a series of devastating realizations after you're gone, after they've pushed you away, or after you've finally established firm boundaries and removed yourself from their life. And these realizations don't arrive all at once in a moment of clarity, but cascade over time. Each new understanding compounds the previous one, creating a progressive downfall where their mental state, their self-perception, their hope for future relationships, their overall quality of life deteriorates in ways that feel increasingly irreversible and increasingly unbearable. And the tragic element is that every single realization is something they could have understood while you were still available. Every recognition of what you provided and what they destroyed could have motivated different behavior if it had occurred during the relationship rather than after the relationship ended. But their defensive system prevented these realizations while you were present. Their patterns kept them blind to what they had and what they were risking. Their attachment wounds made them interpret your care as a threat rather than as a gift. And only your absence, only the stark contrast between life with you and life without you, only the failed attempts to replace what you provided creates the conditions where truth penetrates their defenses and forces recognition that destroys their remaining illusions about themselves and about what their patterns cost them. The downfall is not a single catastrophic collapse, but a slow, grinding deterioration where each realization removes another layer of self-protection, where each new understanding forces confrontation with another aspect of their failure and their loss, where the cumulative weight of delayed recognitions creates the depression, despair, self-hatred, and hopelessness that characterizes their post-relationship existence, and that makes their life feel fundamentally ruined in ways that cannot be repaired. They realize you were the person who made their defended life bearable and you're irreplaceable. They realize their patterns destroyed the best relationship they'll ever have, and no one else will offer what you offered. They realize their defensive strategies don't protect them, but isolate them in a prison of loneliness worse than any intimacy anxiety they were avoiding. They realize they'll carry this loss and this regret for the rest of their lives with no possibility of redemption or restoration. Each realization is a nail in the coffin of their hope for happiness. Each new understanding is evidence of their fundamental brokenness. Each delayed recognition confirms that they destroyed something precious through their own dysfunction and must live with the consequences of that destruction forever, the delayed realizations that hit them after your absence. The avoidant person experiences specific delayed realizations after you're gone, recognitions that penetrate their defensive system only in your absence and that collectively create an awareness of what they've lost and what they've done. Understanding these specific realizations reveals both what they're finally able to see and why these recognitions come too late to change the outcome. They realize you were the person who made their defended existence tolerable, providing connection and meaning that made their avoidant lifestyle sustainable rather than unbearably lonely. While you were present, the avoidant took your presence for granted, focused on the discomfort you created rather than on what you provided. But your absence reveals the truth. You were making their life work. You provided connection that alleviated their loneliness without overwhelming them. You gave their life meaning and purpose. You created a reason to engage with life rather than just withdrawing from it. Without you, they discover their defended lifestyle isn't sustainable. The independence they thought they wanted feels like isolation. The freedom they thought they needed feels like emptiness. The self-sufficiency they prided themselves on feels like a lonely prison. The realization that you were essential infrastructure supporting their life, not an optional addition to it, is devastating because it proves they didn't just lose a romantic partner. They lost the person who made their entire existence bearable. They realize you saw the real them beneath their defenses and accepted what you saw, something they may never find again. The avoidant recognizes in retrospect that you didn't just see their defended exterior, but saw through to their wounded, authentic self. You recognized their patterns as defenses. You understood their fears. You perceived their pain. And despite seeing all of this, you accepted them. You didn't reject them for being damaged. You didn't judge them for being defended. You offered understanding and compassion for their struggles. This combination of being truly seen and still accepted is extraordinarily rare. And the avoidant realizes they're unlikely to find this again. Most people will interact only with their defended surface, or if they do perceive the wounds beneath, they'll be repelled rather than accepting. The realization that they were fully known and still loved, and that they destroyed this irreplaceable gift, creates profound grief. They realize your patience and understanding weren't weakness or dependency, but were extraordinary strength they exploited and didn't reciprocate. The avoidant initially interpreted your patience as neediness, your understanding as an inability to leave, your tolerance of their patterns as evidence you had no other options. They realize now they were completely wrong. Your patience was strength. It required tremendous emotional regulation and resilience to tolerate their hot and cold behavior. Your understanding was sophistication. It required emotional intelligence to see their patterns as wounds rather than as character flaws. Your tolerance was choice. You had options and worth and could have left at any time, but chose to stay and try. The realization that they interpreted profound strength as weakness, that they exploited generosity rather than honoring it, creates deep shame about their fundamental misreading of you and their selfish response to your gifts. They realize the discomfort they felt with you was their intimacy anxiety, not anything you were doing wrong, meaning they destroyed the relationship because of their own dysfunction rather than because of incompatibility. The avoidant blamed you for the discomfort they felt. Your needs felt like too much. Your expectations felt like pressure. Your presence felt suffocating. They thought you were the problem, thought the relationship was wrong, thought they needed to escape you specifically. But attempting other relationships or sitting with their isolation reveals the truth. The discomfort was their intimacy anxiety, their fear of vulnerability, their terror of being truly known. These feelings would emerge with anyone who got close, would appear in any relationship that approached genuine intimacy. The realization that they destroyed the relationship with you because of discomfort, that was their own dysfunction rather than your fault, that you weren't the problem but their patterns were, is devastating because it means the loss was completely preventable and was entirely their responsibility. They realize you were trying to love them while they were defending against love, creating a tragic dynamic where what they needed most was what they most actively rejected. The avoidant recognizes that your efforts to connect, to be intimate, to build relationship together weren't attempts to trap or control them, but were genuine efforts to love them. You were offering exactly what their wounded heart needed: acceptance, understanding, consistent presence, safe intimacy. And they responded to your love by defending against it, by withdrawing from it, by making it unsafe and unwelcome. The realization that they spent the relationship pushing away the very thing they needed most, that they rejected love when it was offered because they were too defended to receive it, creates profound regret about the tragic waste of what could have been a healing connection. They realize everyone they encounter now is being compared to you and found lacking, proving you set a standard they'll never find matched again. The avoidant tries to date, tries to connect with new people, tries to find what they had with you elsewhere, but every person falls short. Every new connection is measured against what they had with you: the depth, the understanding, the safety, the acceptance, and no one measures up. The constant unfavorable comparisons prove you weren't just one option among many, but were exceptional, rare, possibly unique in what you offered. The realization that they'll spend the rest of their life comparing everyone to you and finding everyone inadequate, that they'll never stop missing you because no one will ever match what you provided, creates a hopeless recognition that they destroyed something irreplaceable that they'll search for unsuccessfully for the rest of their life. They realize their defensive patterns don't protect them, but isolate them, that what they thought was self-preservation was actually self-destruction. The avoidant's entire defensive structure is built on the belief that their patterns protect them. Withdrawal protects against being hurt. Emotional unavailability protects against being controlled. Independence protects against being abandoned. But your absence and their resulting suffering reveals the truth. Their patterns don't protect them, they destroy them. The withdrawal creates isolation more painful than any hurt from connection would have been. The emotional unavailability creates loneliness more unbearable than any vulnerability would have been. The defended independence creates abandonment through driving people away rather than preventing abandonment. The realization that their entire defensive system is counterproductive, that their strategies for self-protection actually create the suffering they're trying to avoid, dismantles their fundamental worldview and leaves them without a framework for navigating relationships or life. They realize they'll carry this loss and this regret for the rest of their lives, that some consequences are permanent, and that they've destroyed their chance for the happiness you represented. The avoidant recognizes that this isn't a temporary setback they'll recover from, isn't a learning experience that will lead to a better future, isn't a loss that time will heal. This is permanent. They'll always carry the regret about losing you. They'll always compare others to you. They'll always know they destroyed their best chance. They'll always live with the knowledge of what their patterns cost them. The permanence, the recognition that they'll be 70 years old still thinking about you and what they lost, still regretting their choices, still living with consequences of their patterns, creates despair about a future that will never be free from this burden. How each realization compounds into a progressive downfall. The avoidant person's realizations don't exist in isolation, but build on each other. Each new recognition makes previous realizations more painful and creates a cascading psychological deterioration that constitutes their downfall. Understanding how the realizations compound reveals why the avoidance post-relationship state gets progressively worse rather than improving over time. The realization that you made their life bearable compounds with the realization that no one else can do this, creating despair about a future where they'll be permanently alone and miserable. Initially, realizing you were essential to their life's functioning is painful, but when this combines with the recognition that no one else can fill this role, that everyone falls short compared to you, the combined realization creates hopelessness. They're not just missing you, they're facing a future where they'll be without the person who made life livable and where no replacement exists. This compounded recognition transforms grief about a specific loss into despair about a permanent condition, making their future look unbearably bleak in ways that a single realization wouldn't create. The realization that you saw and accepted their true self compounds with the realization that they'll never be fully known again, creating profound existential loneliness. Recognizing you truly saw them is bittersweet, validating but painful given the loss. But when combined with the recognition that future relationships will be with people who only see their defended surface, who never get beneath their walls, who never truly know them, the compound effect is devastating loneliness. They lost not just a romantic partner, but the only person who truly knew them. And they face a future of being unknown, of never being seen, of perpetual surface-level relationships. This compounds into existential isolation, where they're alone, not just socially, but in the fundamental sense of being unknown and unknowable to others. The realization that your patience was strength, they exploited compounds with the realization that no one else will offer such patience. Creating recognition, they destroyed the relationship that accommodated their patterns and won't find such accommodation again. Understanding that your patience was extraordinary is humbling. But when combined with the recognition that other people won't be so patient, won't tolerate their patterns so generously, won't give so many chances. The compound effect is the recognition that they destroyed the one relationship where their dysfunction was manageable and face a future where their patterns will destroy relationships much more quickly because others won't be as understanding. This creates accelerating isolation, where their patterns drive people away faster and faster as they encounter people with less tolerance than you had. The realization that their discomfort was intimacy anxiety rather than your fault compounds with the realization that this anxiety will appear in any intimate relationship, creating a trapped feeling where connection triggers anxiety and isolation triggers loneliness. Understanding their discomfort was their issue is important self-awareness. But when combined with the recognition that this pattern will repeat in any future intimate relationship, that they'll feel the same anxiety with anyone who gets close, the compound effect is a recognition of being trapped. They need connection to avoid loneliness, but connection triggers anxiety, creating an impossible bind where they're suffering regardless of whether they're in a relationship or alone. This trapped recognition creates hopelessness about ever being comfortable, ever being happy, ever finding a solution to their fundamental relational dysfunction. The realization that they rejected love while you offered it compounds with the realization that they don't know how to receive love, creating a recognition of fundamental incapacity. Knowing they pushed you away is painful regret. But when combined with the recognition that they lack the fundamental capacity to receive love even when offered, that their defensive structure prevents them from accepting what they most need, the compound effect is devastating self-knowledge about being fundamentally broken. They don't just regret losing you, they recognize they couldn't have kept you even if they'd wanted to because they lack the basic capacity to receive and reciprocate love. This recognition of fundamental incapacity creates despair about being unfixable, about being too damaged to ever have a healthy relationship. The realization that you're the standard everyone fails to meet compounds with the realization that this standard makes them unable to invest in anyone new, creating paralysis in their romantic life. Understanding you set a high bar is a recognition of your value. But when combined with the recognition that constantly comparing others to you makes genuine investment in new people impossible, the compound effect is romantic paralysis. They can't move on because everyone is inadequate compared to you, but they can't have you back, leaving them stuck in a state where they're alone but unable to build new relationships because they're perpetually comparing and finding everyone lacking. This paralysis ensures their loneliness continues indefinitely. The realization that their patterns are destructive rather than protective compounds with the realization that they don't know how to function without these patterns, creating an identity crisis and loss of framework for navigating life. Understanding their defensive system is counterproductive is a significant recognition. But when combined with the recognition that they've built their entire personality and their entire approach to life around these patterns and don't know who they are or how to function without them, the compound effect is complete identity dissolution. They recognize their patterns destroy their happiness, but they have no alternative strategies, no different ways of being, no other framework for managing relationships in life. This leaves them without a rudder, without a sense of self, without a way to move forward, creating an existential crisis on top of a relational crisis. The realization that this loss is permanent compounds with each other realization, creating a cumulative weight that becomes an unbearable psychological burden. Each individual realization is heavy on its own, but the permanence of the loss means they'll carry not just one recognition, but all of them forever. They'll permanently live with knowing you made their life bearable and you're gone. They'll permanently live with knowing you truly saw them and no one else will. They'll permanently live with knowing they destroyed this through their own dysfunction. The cumulative, permanent nature of all these recognitions together creates a psychological burden so heavy it crushes hope, crushes motivation, crushes any sense that life can be good again. creating the downfall where they're not just sad about a loss, but are destroyed by the permanent weight of multiple devastating recognitions they must carry simultaneously for the rest of their lives, the specific ways the downfall manifests in their daily life. The avoidant person's psychological downfall, resulting from their delayed realizations, manifests in concrete, observable ways in their daily life and functioning. Understanding these specific manifestations reveals how internal realizations translate into external deterioration that affects every aspect of their existence. The downfall manifests as pervasive depression that colors every experience, making even previously enjoyable activities feel empty and pointless. The avoidant experiences classic depressive symptoms: low mood, anhedonia, lack of motivation, sleep disruption, appetite changes. But underlying these symptoms is their specific recognition about what they've lost and what their patterns have cost them. They cannot enjoy anything because everything is filtered through awareness of your absence and their responsibility for that absence. Social events feel hollow because you're not there to share them with. Achievements feel meaningless because they don't have you to celebrate with. Nothing provides satisfaction or joy because the loss of you and the weight of their realizations overshadows everything. The depression is not just a chemical imbalance, but is an appropriate psychological response to the devastating recognitions they're carrying. The downfall manifests as social withdrawal, where they isolate increasingly because connection with others reminds them of what they lost with you. The avoidant retreats from social situations, cancels plans, stops reaching out to friends. Social interaction is painful because it creates comparison. These people don't understand them like you did. These connections feel superficial compared to the depth they had with you. These attempts at connection remind them of their incapacity to sustain intimacy. The isolation intensifies their loneliness, but feels safer than engaging with others and being constantly reminded of what they're missing. The withdrawal becomes a self-perpetuating cycle where isolation increases depression, which increases withdrawal, which increases isolation. The downfall manifests as an inability to engage in new romantic relationships or as a pattern of sabotaging any connections before they develop depth. The avoidant either avoids dating entirely because everyone is inadequate compared to you, or they date but sabotage connections before they develop intimacy because they know they'll just repeat their patterns and destroy things again. This romantic paralysis ensures they remain alone, which increases their misery. But attempting relationships feels pointless because they know the outcome will be either settling for someone who isn't you or destroying the relationship through their patterns. The inability to move forward romantically keeps them stuck in their suffering without a pathway out. The downfall manifests as obsessive rumination about you and about what they lost, with constant mental replays of relationship moments and imagined alternative scenarios. The avoidant cannot stop thinking about you, replaying conversations, remembering moments of closeness, imagining what could have been different if they'd behaved differently, fantasizing about scenarios where you come back or where they get another chance. This obsessive thinking is torture because it keeps them trapped in a past they cannot change while preventing them from being present in their actual life. They're not living in the present. They're living in memories of you and in fantasies about different outcomes. And this mental preoccupation prevents any possibility of building an actual future. The downfall manifests as deteriorating self-care, where they neglect their health, appearance, and living environment because nothing feels worth the effort. The avoidant stops taking care of themselves. They don't eat well, don't exercise, don't maintain hygiene or appearance with previous care, let their living space become messy or dirty. The deterioration in self-care reflects their internal state. If they're broken and their life is ruined, why bother maintaining themselves? Why put in effort when nothing will make them feel better anyway? The visible deterioration creates a feedback loop where they feel worse about themselves because of how they're living, which reduces motivation to improve self-care, which makes them feel even worse. The downfall manifests as increased reliance on numbing behaviors or substances to escape the psychological pain of their realizations. The avoidant might drink more, use drugs, or engage in compulsive behaviors, gaming, porn, work obsession, anything that provides temporary relief from constant awareness of their loss and their responsibility for that loss. These numbing strategies provide brief respite, but ultimately make things worse by preventing genuine processing and by creating additional problems. The reliance on escape mechanisms is evidence of the unbearable psychological pain they're carrying and their inability to sit with their realizations without some form of anesthesia. The downfall manifests as volatility in work performance or an inability to maintain focus and productivity because their preoccupation with you interferes with functioning. The avoidant struggles at work, missing deadlines, making mistakes, unable to concentrate, calling in sick, having conflicts with colleagues. Their job performance suffers because they cannot focus on work when they're constantly thinking about you, constantly processing their realizations, constantly managing depression and regret. The work problems might create additional stress, poor reviews, job loss, or financial strain that compounds their overall downfall and provides more evidence that their life is falling apart. The downfall manifests as expressions of their suffering to others that reveal their state, making friends or family concerned about their well-being. The avoidant's suffering becomes visible to others. Friends notice they're different. Family expresses concern. Colleagues ask if they're okay. The avoidant might break down and express their regret about losing you, might admit they're struggling, might reveal how destroyed they feel. These expressions to others confirm the internal downfall is severe enough to be observable externally, that they're not managing to hide their deterioration, that their suffering is profound enough that others can see something is seriously wrong, why their realizations come too late to change anything. The avoidant person's delayed realizations, while accurate and significant, come too late to change the outcome or to prevent the consequences they're experiencing. Understanding why timing renders their awareness useless reveals both the tragedy of their situation and the importance of your continued boundaries, despite their belated understanding. Their realizations come too late because you've moved on emotionally, establishing firm boundaries that their belated awareness cannot penetrate. By the time the avoidant fully realizes what they lost and what they did, you've done your healing work. You've processed the pain. You've grieved the relationship. You've established firm no-contact boundaries. You've closed the door emotionally. Their realizations about your value and their mistakes arrive to find you unavailable, uninterested in hearing about their epiphanies, clear that you've moved forward. The timing failure is complete. They understand when understanding no longer matters because the person who would have benefited from their understanding is gone and isn't coming back.